皆様、こんにちは。今日はいらしていただきありがとうございます。ご出席ありがとうございます。ごめんなさい。ボタンを押すのを忘れてしまいました。I forgot to press my bilingual button. Now I can speak English. I did this ploy in front of 600 elementary students a while ago. After my speech, first graders came up to me and said, "Can I touch your button? Can I touch your button?" Eyes glittering with curiosity. I think, act, and behave like a Japanese. I think, act, and behave like an American. I can confidently say that only diverse-minded individuals understand and can accept diversity. Imagine a person who has eaten an apple would not understand about an apple. A person who has eaten an apple and an orange understands both fruit. Today, I'm going to talk to you about Neoterism, a term coined by myself. Neoterism is an emergence of a diverse mindset in the process of regulating through two cultures. A person who has Neoterism is flexible, malleable, and able to accommodate diversity. When a person goes through cross-cultural relationships, usually an individual learns a new language, and potentially that individual develops two cultural identities. Biculturalism has been an enigma for the longest time. In the turn of the century, these people referred as marginal, spiritually unstable, restless, malaise-like, inferior in status, and they were inflicted by negative stereotypes such as apples, bananas, Oreos. When I gave a presentation at the California Association of Bilingual Education in San Diego, a Latino lady came up to me after my speech in tears. She was struggling with her biculturalism. Her parents insist on having her maintain her heritage Latino identity. At school, they would insist on having her maintain a Eurocentric identity. She was definitely struggling with her identity. Another story in Japan. I knew a Japanese boy. He said, "I don't have to speak Japanese. I don't have to learn Japanese because I'm going to go to American college and get a degree, and I'm going to work for a large American corporation." He was dead wrong. I know from experience that he will never be able to sever his tie with Japan. Unfortunately, we are misinformed about the potentials and benefits of developing biculturalism. Developing biculturalism is possible. You don't have to be marginal. In the process of going back and forth to cultures, I lived in Japan for extensive time. I lived in Japan and the United States for extensive time. I came to realize that biculturalism, there's a potential for biculturalism. In this chart, it represents my lifestyle in Japan and the United States. In 1984 to 1992, I was in Japan working in an international department, functioning like a Japanese person. In 1992 to 2000, I came back, I went to the United States, stationed in Encinitas, California, and worked as a coordinating manager for a new developing graduate institute. And later, I became a home-based teacher at an immersion program at Culver City, California. In 2000 to 2009, I came back to Japan, and then I was working at a international school as a home-based teacher, later became a director of the English program at a private Catholic school in Japan. 2009, 2017, I went back to the United States once again to get my doctorate degree, and later I taught at 3 universities in Southern California. And once again, stay with me, okay? Once again, 2017 to now, I'm back in Japan teaching at a Japanese university. In the process of going back and forth, I came across, before that, this photo. The left side is my Japanese self as a Japanese educator. The right side is a lecturer at a university in California. Can you tell the difference? Very different, right? So excuse me. In the process of going back and forth to cultures, I experienced 3 disconnects that led me to the development of Neoterism, as well as the urgency to provide this information to you. The first disconnect was my cultural identity. I was, after I graduated college, I went back to Japan, but I was lost. I didn't have any Japanese education. So the questions that kept on emerging was, am I Japanese or am I American? Speaking 2 languages when I was small was a challenge. I was born in Tokyo, and later on my family was stationed in Los Angeles. We lived in Los Angeles for 4 years, came back to Japan, and I spent my formative and adolescence years in Japan, in Tokyo, at international schools. At that time, I developed what I call an international school identity. The classes were in English, but I did not grow up watching Superman or Batman. I grew up watching manga and anime. So I knew I was not Japanese. I knew I was not American. The second disconnect was in mid-1990s. I went back to Boston to study, and I came across this theory of identity, a monolithic theory of identity by Erik Erikson. And he defines identity as sameness and continuity. What this means is, for example, John. John was John yesterday, he's John today, he's John tomorrow, and he's gonna remain as a John. He's not gonna change his identity. So there's a sameness and continuity of the identity. But when posed the question, what happens to this definition when a person goes through multiple cultures and experience, for instance, biculturalism? No answer was given. The third disconnect is now. What we are all going through, day in and day out. We hear about the disconnections of the global world. Disconnect between the rich and the poor, disconnect between technology and humanness, disconnect between virtual reality and reality, disconnect between nature and humans, disconnect between nations and ideologies. Everywhere we see a disconnection. It's about to belong or not to belong. 3 clarifications before I talk about Neoterism. The first, I keep on talking about bicultural identity development, but Neoterism also implies the people who go through multicultural experiences. Clarification number 2, I talk about Japanese identity, American identity, but Neoterism implies other cross-cultural relationships as well. A Latino person growing up in America, a British with a French. Third clarification, in the process of going through cross-cultural relations, the first and foremost development is your language. Language development is the first thing. Okay, so back to Neoterism. Once again, Neoterism is the emergence of a new mindset, a diverse mindset in the process of cultivating 2 cultural identities. I need to describe what I mean by diverse mindset. In other words, it's another way to look at the world. It's a new awareness. It's a new earth living. In order to go a little bit more deeply into this understanding, I'm going to talk about 4 elements necessary to understand. The first element is the new awareness that identity is your choice. When you grow up in one culture, you don't really think about your identity. For example, an Indian person growing up in India naturally becomes an Indian, right? But when you launch on a bicultural path, it's inevitable that you think about your identity. While the choices are oftentimes determined by the social and ideological agendas, and oftentimes these factors steer your identity. Ultimately, remember, you have the choice for your identity. Second element is functioning. Functioning is your identity. In the process of going back and forth, I realized sameness and continuity does not quite fit. So what's the definition? It's about belonging to a community. It's about being part of a community. It's functioning of the community that determines your identity. What I mean by functioning is it could be working in the community, it could be volunteering in the community, becoming part of the community. That defines who you are, your identity. Third element is you need to maintain cultural balance. And what I mean by this is an individual requires to have equally substantial and significant experiences in both cultures. Okay, you can't just focus on one culture, both cultures. For example, while sometimes the two cultures could be challenging due to the social and ideological understanding, it can be done. Let me give you an example. My Japanese identity and my American identity. Japan is a collectivist culture. And what that means is they value harmony, a community-based mind. United States is an individualistic society, which they value voicing your opinion, self-esteem. In Japan, they say a nail that is sticking out is hammered in. My mother oftentimes told me, listen to other people, be quiet, silence is gold. In the United States, they say a squeaking wheel gets the grease. So if you voice yourself out loud like this, which is the squeaking wheel, you get noticed. People recognize you. So one culture tells you to be silent. The other culture tells you to make yourself noticed. Can such dichotomizing perspectives be embraced? Can it? The answer is yes. The reason why I say this is because as people, we are equipped to maintain balance, homeostasis. You all heard about physiological homeostasis, also psychological homeostasis. That means we all want to feel happy. We want to feel good. We want to maintain ourselves. We want to feel comfortable. When there's tension, we want to when there's tension between two cultures, we could still maintain that balance. I can maintain a mentality that is community-based, as well as maintain a mind that has to voice my opinion. I can remain silent. I can remain expressive. The fourth element, omnibus consciousness. This is when an individual understands the differences and the commonalities of each cultures, as well as a person able to blend the two cultural understandings and create a new reality. I can think, act, and behave like a Japanese. I can think, act, and behave like an American. I can think and act like a global person, a blend between two cultures. It's not about how you look. It's not about how you appear. It's not about where you were born. What matters is how much are you willing to give to the community? How much are you willing to be a contributed factor of that community? How much you recognize and appreciate the jewels of each cultures and willing to make a good community, create your good community. It's about becoming a problem solver. It's about you becoming a storyteller of your own story. Let me tell you an omnibus consciousness personal story. I created an English program for a Japanese school. It was based on constructivism. And that means the curriculum was meaningful education, focusing on the Japanese culture. So I blended the US wisdom of constructivism with the Japanese program and created a new program. So in conclusion, what can we do? What can you do? What can educators do? One answer is to teach another language to everyone in the world. Language has the capability to transform an individual. Second language acquisition is the first step. We are in dire need of people who are receptive to multiple ideas and perspectives. And bicultural identity development is one method. Neoterism is another method. In order to deal with the dichotomizing world, in order to create one world. It's not about to belong or not to belong. It's about to belong and not belong. Once again, those who have a diverse mindset is capable of understanding diversity. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance, and hopefully you start creating your bilingual buttons and then live life with zest and enthusiasm, eyes glittering with curiosity. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. ありがとうございました。